Alrighty. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you all for joining us at City Hall today. Both Chief Ramsey and I wanted to update everyone on the efforts to continually improve community policing here in the city of Wichita and highlight again in many ways that our department has made huge leaps forwards in the last several years and especially in the last couple years. Over the last several months, as you all know, we've witnessed a great deal of national unrest in the wake of the heinous murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. And Americans throughout this nation, including here in Wichita, as you all know, have voiced concerns about how they are policed. During this last budget process, we definitely heard from many citizens here in Wichita that had concerns about the budget of the police department and again, how we are funding police operations. And we also know that due to decades of budget issues on the federal and the state level, there have been cuts to a lot of the supportive services that are out there and available, and that those responsibilities have been thrust upon law enforcement in general, not only in Wichita, but across the nation. One of the results of those cuts has been the assignment of those necessary services like mental health or social workers. That also includes homeless outreach, and we do have a homeless outreach team. Mental health assistance are two of the leading needs in our community. Last week when we passed the city's 2021 budget, the City Council took the beginning steps to actually establish the groundwork to further improve policing in our community. Over the next several months, we'll begin to more formally establish those next positive steps to build on the progress we've had and continue to build toward a better department. And specifically, I had asked that staff bring that back in the workshop. So that'll be available to not only to the council, but to the community to see the progress that we're making. With that, I'll turn it over to Chief Ramsey to talk about more of the good things that WPD is doing.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Gordon Ramsay with the Wichita Police Department. And appreciate you being here and covering this. This is an important issue to our community. We've heard from a lot of people concerned about, the social ills that police keep getting sucked into to deal with. And the community's interest in continuing to have a strong community policing presence within our city. For me, that is at my heart and soul. The way we police, how this department is. The department has a long history of having really tremendous community policing programs. But as the social ills continue to fall upon police, it does leave us with less and less time to deal with many of the community issues. Mental health calls, for example, that police are on often takes 2 to 3 times what a normal police call does. So it is a significant amount of resources that we have to put into it. Since coming to Wichita in 2016, it's really been a focus of mine, pushing the officers closer to the community, getting them out and interacting, and also listening to our community on what we can do better. We've also been working with our grants office and ComCare to try and find social workers to embed inside the police department, because we know that we have a significant amount of calls that really don't always fall under the police purview. Mental health calls is probably one of those that are at the forefront. For instance, was just hearing about a male who is currently in crisis. We've taken him to for care 13 times as he's suicidal in the last month. And again, it continues to spin and we're unable to get him stabilized. That's where embedded social workers and working more closely with our social services, we can have an impact. And it's an area we're going to continue to focus on. We're also going to be partnering with the School of Social Work, Wichita State University, to see what opportunities exist there on how we can partner with them. We're not sure what it may look like, but they have embraced our offer, and we look forward to working with them on what may come out of potential opportunities there. We announced last week we had the 2 DCF positions, the caseworkers that work with us and our officers on mental health and particularly issues around families and children, to be more responsive and to provide better service. And we've also been at the table and are an active part in the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Committee that's really seeking funding for our community for mental health and substance abuse issues. These are areas where traditional roles, traditional funding has come from feds, state, and counties. What it seems like today is that there is this microscope on municipal governments to provide more and more services for what has traditionally been state, federal, and county responsibilities. So we're going to work with our partners, and we have been through the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Committee to see what we can do to find more funding. But it cannot be a solution just based on city municipal government alone. That's what I had. Thank you.
Just to wrap up really quick, definitely always thank you, Chief, for that. Today, we wanted to highlight and make sure that the public knew that we heard loud and clear the demands of the protesters and activists and the concerns that they had, and that we are taking real steps towards that. Some of that is also looking at restorative justice efforts that will help out with the circumstances we've heard about from some of these groups. When you look at suspended driver's license in the state of Kansas and in the city of Wichita, we have over, I believe, 100,000 folks that have a suspended driver's license. So we're looking at ways through restorative justice to help out with that. Also, folks who have court fines that have grown to be too burdensome for paying back, and maybe that's a cloud over their life right now. Or folks who have prior convictions that keep them from being able to get a job or quality housing. We're looking at helping out in all of those areas. And again, hearing from those who are protesting, exercising their First Amendment right. We also have community leaders that will continue to work to explore ways to support citizens who need it most and to help guide us along that path. I'm definitely appreciative of all the engagement we've received thus far in our efforts to improve policing in Wichita. That includes conversations with those protesters and activists, highlighting ways in which we can continue to work together. And we're all at the table for that to make sure that those continue. Again, anybody who has spoken out, spoken up, those who came to the council meeting, those who sent the hundreds of emails we received, we heard you. We definitely heard you. We're working towards solution on that. And one thing I wanted to highlight, I also did from the bench, is that if you truly take away the hashtags and some of the triggering terminology, we're all talking about the same stuff. Folks who, again, back the blue and just support law enforcement 100%. They want officers to be able to go home to their families safe at night. Protesters want the same thing for the officers, but also for the citizen as well. We're all saying the same thing. Protesters talked about the additional burdens that law enforcement has nowadays. Chief Ramsey has been talking about that since he arrived. Many of us, I'm on the council now, but as an activist, talked about the same thing. Our officers needed help with crisis intervention training, mental health, social work. Those are things that we've been hearing. The police department has been working towards that, but again, we want to acknowledge we've heard that we can do better. So we still have more work to do, and we're committed to doing that. And then just to make sure that the city works for every citizen, and quality policing gives both the officer and the citizen the best chance of making it home. So with that, we can pause for questions if you all have any, but again, we just wanted to highlight that voices were heard and we are working towards solution in those efforts.
You talk about community policing, getting more officers in the neighborhoods and the streets. Talk about the changes that could come to the motorcycle unit. We've kind of seen some talk on social media about that. Is there anything set in stone or some ideas that you could share with us?
So nothing is set in stone at this point. I guess another point we wanted to make after saying that we've heard folks is that some of this takes time to lay the groundwork and make sure we do it right, not just do it quickly. So conversations have begun. We talked about the motorcycle unit. A few organizations have brought that up, but really we're looking at how we can move some officers into community policing efforts, which is what we also heard was what folks wanted, by not getting rid of the unit fully, because we still have some traffic issues, and the chief can talk better about that than I can right now, to make sure we're still getting that taken care of, and we still have citizens that complain about folks speeding and doing things they shouldn't. So traffic control is definitely necessary, but we're looking at ways in which we can shift some of our officers into the areas that are more beneficial. And as well, when you think about the partnerships with ComCare, the WSU School of Social Work, also how can we relieve some of that burden off of our officers so they can get back into doing some of the things that they should?
So along the lines of community policing, a lot of that is problem solving. and working with your communities to address what is important to them. And I can tell you that in many neighborhoods, traffic is often the #1 complaint. And so, while there's been a focus on the motorcycle unit, which was ultimately paid for with grant money through the state, but in many neighborhoods, they want traffic enforcement because they're worried about distracted driving. DWIs is still significant. We have 25 to 30 traffic fatalities a year. I know I have children, and when they're outside and riding their bikes, I don't want them mowed down by a drunk driver or someone watching their phone. Traffic enforcement is a key to any community for safety. And that's something that is important to remember. So we're not going to make any rash decisions on moving staff here or there. What we're going to do is we're going to continue to engage the community and see what's important to them. And as we look at maybe reallocating some staff to some different positions, like I would love to have more foot and bike patrols, right? That's where you really get in with the community and meet them, and little areas where an officer can take ownership of it and get to know everybody and work on problems and relationships. We don't have that luxury right now because we are stretched thin. So we are going to look at maybe moving some positions around and doing some pilot mini projects. But how that's going to look is going to be dependent on our conversations with our elected officials as well as our community members.
Chief Ramsey, you just spoke about wanting to get social workers embedded in the department. I know a lot of people are going to ask, where's the timeline where you all are doing that? A lot of people have been voicing concerns about mental health calls. Do you know exactly where the unit is and trying to get that thing going, and an update you can provide as far as the timeline goes?
A couple different things going on. One is we're communicating with our partners at the county for opportunities. We've also been seeking grants. For the last 4 years, since 2016, we've sought grant funding for social workers. It's kind of an out-of-the-box idea, and when there have been federal grants, and I think now the focus is on more people are aware of it and talking about it. So we may have a better chance. We have a grant that's pending right now where I'm really optimistic. It was for 4 positions that would embed a social worker in each of the bureaus. And so we should be hearing within a month as to whether or not we're going to receive that. If not, we're going to continue to look for innovative ways and through partnerships with the state, feds, county, anything we can do to bring more of that into our efforts. Because you've got to remember, and they may say, well, why does it have to be embedded in the police department? Well, we're the clearinghouse, right? It's the only number you can dial 3 digits and get a government agent to your house at 24/7. And oftentimes we're that first filter, but we're going to look for ways to bring in these mental health providers where we don't always need a commissioned police officer to go to. I mean, that is the future. We've been trying it long before this has come up. What you're hearing is echoing really of what we've been saying for the last X number of years. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.